We just discovered that our film crew spent some of their formative years at Stella's.
Yeah, I've gotten to hear this story more than once.
Yeah.
Recently, I've been in the hospital, and the number of people and nurses and docs that have studied in here was kind of an uplift for me.
Yeah. When the finals come around, we have tables filled with people studying to be nurses and studying to be doctors, and they've got their textbooks laid out in front of them, and they're quizzing each other, and the place is packed. So, did you?
You know, I remember the first time I realized that people from outside the state of Colorado knew Stella's. And I picked up a hitchhiker in the middle of the desert with a guitar case. And I was driving an RV, and everybody goes, "Oh, don't pick him up. I'm gonna pick him up." So he gets in the RV, and we're talking, telling him I own a coffee house in Denver. He goes, "Which one?" I go, "Stella's." He goes, reaches in his wallet and brings out a drink card from Stella. And he played music all the way to Tucson, which I thought was pretty cool.
And so when you drove up to this building, and this would have been what, 1990?
It would have been December 16th, 1990.
1990.
Yeah.
And you looked at it. Did you know, what did you see when you looked at it?
My brother-in-law saw it first, and I had had a surgery on my neck and had been going to a Spalding pain clinic. And I realized that my life needed to change, and Chris and I had talked about getting in business for probably 4 or 5 years and looking for property. And he said, "You got to see this." And I'm going, "Okay." And it was a duplex. It is a duplex. It was the other side. And it was a dull gray, and nothing really picked up, and walked in the front room, and it had a really strange odor to it. It had been St. Mary's salad dressing.
Right.
And they made the salad dressing in a claw-footed bathtub.
Right. They didn't also use it as a bathtub.
Anyways, it was in pretty poor condition, but the price was right. I think we paid $50,000 and put $100,000 into that room.
That was a pretty good deal.
It.
Yeah. So you knew that it was going to be a coffee shop. You were going out looking for a coffee shop.
Yeah.
Because you had been inspired.
And my brother-in-law, again, he spent a lot of time up in the Northwest where Starbucks was. And he'd come back and he goes, "Stan, they're putting coffee houses on every corner." He said, "I think there's some longevity in it." At the same time, maybe a little bit before that, I'd been looking at a European sign book from the library, and there's my name on one of them. So I'm looking, how long has that coffee house been there? This is Amsterdam. And I think at the time it'd been there 300 years, and I'm going, "Oh, there's some longevity to that business."
Time to branch out. Yeah.
Which was another encouragement, honoring our ancestors somewhat. Plus, the Dutch are more tolerant than most people.
right. And that's sort of sensibility has passed over into Stella's as it evolved. Yeah.
You know, Stella's has grown organically over the years. Obviously, when we were first starting out, you don't see exactly where it's going. And it was just the other side. Matter of fact, it was just 500 square feet of the other side.
And you ended up living in it, right, for a while?
I lived in the first room off of the main part, um, which was that was all interesting too. I don't know. A little bit of it was before we were completely built. I don't know if Boa Construction really
I remember them.
were excited about me being there, but
Uh-huh.
uh,
Put you to work a
yeah,
little bit.
uh, I only had 3 tables over there, and I was very sensitive on how kids would. I knew I wasn't going to be pouring coffee because of my back issues and chronic pain. So I had to move the bar
Mm-hmm.
in about 18 inches,
Boy.
so they didn't have to walk as much.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe save their legs when they turn it 40 and
Mm-hmm.
no varicose veins. Um, so I was pretty sensitive to movements, and I'd been through the pain clinic or pain factory, I called it. Just trying to prevent people from getting hurt that work for me.
How long did it take for you to turn it into the coffee house? Did it took a few months, and then did you
You
just
know,
fling open the doors and see who would come in? Is that
when
pretty much?
when we opened the door, I didn't know what my expectation. I know that before a football game or something, you get those butterflies,
Mm-hmm.
and I had those opening day, and I can't remember the artist I had, but um, when you first walked in the door, there was a $50,000 uh, painting
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
was there. And that kind of, I think the things I thought about was having art, having music,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and then people studying, which was a lot like my childhood.
Mm-hmm.
I had 9 brothers and sisters, and in the evenings, everybody's around the dining table, or somebody's on the piano or accordion.
And this is in Indiana.
In Indiana.
Farmhouse?
Uh, I wouldn't call it a farmhouse. I grew up on 10 acres. Uh, so we had a couple of acre garden, 1 pig,
Mm-hmm.
2 pigs, and 1 steer, uh, 50 chickens.
That's a lot of chickens.
Uh,
So you had eggs every morning. Yeah.
well, I didn't go to the grocery store until I was about 19, and I was in the Marine Corps. Uh,
Wow.
by then, we canned everything. I didn't know that was good.
That's right. So is Stella to some degree, were you in essence trying to sort of replicate this sort of the dynamic of the house growing up?
Was something that it's like plant seeds of kindness.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that guided my inner soul. It isn't really something you can tell people you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It's more your actions.
Right.
Uh,
And they don't know, they're not necessarily conscious when you're doing it that it's happening. and then later on, and it could be 20 years later on, it there's a connection that they might make, and that's when you see them walking through the door here and saying, "Oh, I started my business here," or "I did my college degree here," or
Pretty
whatever, right?
interesting. There's been law firms started out of this place.
Uh-huh.
Um, I used to watch these two guys that I remember pretty good. They would come in with their little dollies and
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 boxes of records, and
This was their office.
this was their office to get started. Um,
So you didn't mind if people, in essence, were having their businesses here in exchange for buying some coffee. That was,
or really not
yeah,
sometimes because they didn't have any money.
right,
Uh, but they had good energy,
right.
uh, which is a real bonus to be around people with a like mind going,
Yeah.
trying to find their future.
So the notion of it being a real community asset, almost like it's a coffee shop, but it's almost like you're the caretaker of
It evolved.
it evolved. It evolved into that, right? And so now it's it's at the point where it's multi-generational, where you have people coming back who are now in their 40s and they're established, and 10 years from now they're empty nesters, and so it's almost, to some degree, um, it's like an institution at this point.
Yeah, there's a leadership position that is assumed, I think.
Hmm.
Um, at the very beginning, uh, infrastructure was important to me. So we're very close to the SWAT team. Uh, we had city council members in here. We had the mayor
Hmm.
in here. Um,
Yeah, we had some testimony here,
oh yeah,
for winning
Diana DeGette.
awards. Yeah, Diana DeGette, who's a Congress woman. There's a couple of references here to that. You had, I think, did you have the governor came in here at one point?
Had several governors through the House. Hickenlooper in this room.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of his kickoff uh, political, and I worried about that day because there were 50 or 60 people in this room, and I'm going, I don't know that floor is built for that.
Yeah, I've experienced that anxiety too.
Uh,
Yeah.
so, yeah, a lot of people over the years.
You mentioned SWAT specifically, and I know there's some history there because when you got into the neighborhood, it wasn't, gentrified.
Sketchy.
Yeah.
uh, Sending a message to the community that uh, there's going to be peace on the street.
Hmm. And so you basically invited them over, and when they came over, they got free coffee, and that ultimately they became a fixture here
For years
for
and
years.
years and years. Uh, I don't know. I just, like I said, infrastructure, teachers and professors, and um, I remember going to Tikio University, which isn't there anymore, but I put up a by 11 flyer, come study at Stella's,
Mm-hmm.
and put the address. And that started our Asian community. Uh, I did a similar thing at Denver University and Metro. That seemed to, I mean, this was several years into this project, but uh, that opened the door to the study more than anything. And then it just begot, you know,
Yep.
whatever's happening here. I never had to do that again. Uh,
It almost turned into like a perpetual. I mean, now the children of the graduates are studying here. My daughter studied here.
right.
Me and my partner, uh, we decided to move to this street because you were here when we bought the building across the way. So, do you think energetically there's something about this place? Do you feel like it's totally about the people, or do you feel it to some degree? I've wondered the dimensions of the space here are human at a level that compels people to, not compels, I guess, but inspires them to relate to each other. When you walk through the front door, it's a very narrow width. You have to interact with people as you walk by them. You have to say, excuse me, you have to say thank you. It forces you to sort of
Yeah,
relate.
for years and years, I had the cash register backwards.
Mm-hmm.
And it was by design because there was only going to be one barista. So whoever that was had to do all the drinks and then collect the money. It wasn't until you took over that got switched.
Switched. Yeah.
Uh, but there was always a line on. If you ever watch that line, the communication between people was
Mm-hmm.
pretty good for the most part.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
So,
And so that kind of raises a question about the integrity of the folks here and you being, I mean, I view us as being owners of the place, but at the same time I really look at us being more almost like custodians of it. Um,
one of the things I noticed over the years was just stability that seemed to go out from here. Uh, if you ever check the records on real estate, um, it doesn't go down in this neighborhood.
right.
Uh, Politically, you have ups and downs, and recognizing that it's kind of like the duck on a pond.
Mm-hmm.
The duck's on the top, which is what you present,
Mm-hmm.
and your little legs are just kind of moving like that underneath. Um, so stability is making things feel okay in your community, uh, rather than cutting the hours uh, to make more of a profit or whatever. That wasn't what we were doing or what I was doing.
And we've continued that by making sure, I mean, we're open till 10
Right,
for the moment. You used to be open till midnight often, right? At one point.
right. And you're open on Mondays when a lot of businesses close.
Yeah.
Um, and they make sense business wise, but community wise, this house got used when there was a death in the family. When there was a wedding, I'd have people get wedding pictures by the sign.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we used to have sofas in here. It was a sofa room, and that kind of was a softer area
Mm-hmm.
for different conversations.
Mm-hmm.
There's this room, and we still hear it. Are you allowed to talk in there? Because it'd be so quiet.
Yeah, talk about that when you opened this room at first. At one point, you introduced music into it, and then
The
you.
first year we had this was a Waldorf
Uh-huh.
eighth grade class.
Okay.
And the Waldorf school was about a block from here.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, And I think that also helped with that energy of what the space was going to do for people.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, did I know that exactly? No. It's an organic thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of what happened here was because it was allowed to happen. There wasn't a strict
Right.
code of this or that. And I really encourage the young people that work here uh, to learn how to run the whole place. Now, not everybody is equipped to do that, but just opening that up to people. Here's a little bit more education
Mm-hmm.
for whatever you end up doing. But
It's more responsibility. Yeah.
what I want for you is to get air under your wings
Mm-hmm.
and find out what you want to do. Uh, so that's kind of where I was coming from, and I still do.
To some degree, you were hoping. I mean, and I think I feel the same way that that our barista will, and our our patrons um, will move on to bigger and better things. That this is.
What I refer to now with you is build back better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Uh, I love your character. I love who you are. That's why I sold it to you. Uh, and it took us a while talking in this room to get to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Thank you, by the way.
Granted, at that time, I'd had a Whipple surgery and diagnosis of cancer and uh, seemed to beat it for the moment. Uh, I've known Mark for years and years in passing, but we never really took the time to sit down and actually,
Spend some time. Yeah.
yeah. I remember when you built Rosemark,
Mm-hmm.
you'd made a comment about that, and I remember the sculptures that you had gotten, and I'm going, boy, there's an interesting side to this guy.
He's not just a Jewish accountant. There's more going on.
Well, that's exactly right. Um,
I think it's like I was on a different path, and I think our paths ultimately intersected at the perfect time in both of our lives in order to make this.
yeah, I think you've been learning the coffee culture.
Yeah, yeah. It took a while to wear me down and get a chill pill, but I finally came around.
Well,
Yeah.
we went through a few managers, uh, and finding the right person, uh, which you took control of finally,
Yeah.
uh, made the difference.
Yep. We have the right person now.
And
Yeah.
then learning patience to deal with your choice.
Right.
What's
Yeah.
going on here? It's
Well, and that's been a learning experience for me, too, because I'm fundamentally an investor and a numbers person. And so this has added a new chapter and a new dimension,
yeah. Now
for
you're
me
teaching
also.
kids
Yeah.
another dimension. Because I really think as far as a business goes, you brought a lot more sanity to it than my um, dyslexia brought.
Takes two. So the money wall.
Oh
Let's
yeah,
hear about the money wall because this is one of the things that Stella's, to some degree is known for. There are stickers all over the front door, and which you place the first one. and
Protected by angels.
protected by angels. And
Then it filled up.
yeah, and the whole door now is plastered with them. And the money wall is basically currency from all over the globe. So, and it was a lot more extensive a while back. We've kind of framed it and brought it, kind
Yeah,
of.
there were hundreds of bills. Uh, and it's interesting when people come from around the world, they would look for their own currency. And I remember Saddam Hussein, he had some of his bills up there.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just history. Um, but I always enjoyed watching those people look for their own money.
Mm-hmm.
And then usually they would add something to it.
And a lot of them were students from DU who were,
You know,
yeah, foreign,
uh,
yeah,
back in the 90s, we
international.
had a lot of people from Saudi Arabia. They, the government paid for a lot of education from there. Matter of fact, one of my best friends, which that evolved too, but uh, he would be here when we opened every day
Mm-hmm.
until about noon when he left here to go to DU's library.
Okay.
Um, he earned his doctorate in this room, uh, and that took
That's awesome. Yeah.
quite a few years. Now he's running his own department at Kingside University.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I haven't talked to him lately on what he's doing exactly, but he's one of the good men on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
You'd mentioned a few others also that helped early on. I know that you had people help build the deck. You had, or, basically important people in your life who were involved.
you know, I think most employees that came through this house added something, and they were allowed to and encouraged to, whether it was a concrete thing or just mental. Um, they got to participate in its growth.
Yeah.
Um, Things I could have never done because of my physical capabilities. But having those challenges also forced me to explore and find people that would help me
Help. Yeah.
accomplish the goal,
Yeah.
whether I knew what that was or not.
Right. Because they helped drive it. Ultimately, it was a community effort, right?
Yeah, and you know, there were standouts like Jill Ketchen,
Mm-hmm.
uh, who I learned a whole lot from.
She was a manager here for.
Probably 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she was here more or less when we got here.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And we still have breakfast occasionally and meet for coffee, and
Mm-hmm.
that's a very humbling thing to have someone that work for you want to have coffee with you.
Yeah. Right. Right. And Susan Bell. Yeah. I mean,
My goodness.
maybe Pearl Street is a little bit of a different. I mean, it's evolving. It's changing. There's a new generation that's come in, but historically, it was a much. It's still diverse, I guess, but there's a few voices on the street that aren't on the street anymore, but are still, vibrant.
It's hard to match some characters like Susan Bell.
Yeah.
And you know, I got to watch her go from a budding artist to a successful artist. And this is one of the harder things to do in your life. Pick to be an artist. Hmm.
Right. Yeah.
Uh,
And she's commercially successful and Yeah.
And she was involved with a lot of the kids on the street. Uh,
Yep.
a very good role model again. Like Jill, she was a good role model and teacher for the young kids that came to work here. Um, she knew a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and there's others on the street. You know, names aren't popping right out, but Ira Sherman, he was a sculptor and a jeweler
Yeah.
up the alley.
You had an art coffee clutch basically that Ira was a part of, right?
Yeah,
For probably 5 to 10 years.
probably.
And they were here pretty much almost every morning or a few times a week.
Some interesting characters in there. There was a maintenance man from DU.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just a diverse group of people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know. I really feel humbled by by the goodness of people.
And it's come back to you. We have people come in, I'm not sure how many a week come in and they want to know where you are and how you're doing and ask about you. And that's,
Amazing
yeah, I mean, that's really, and it,
to me.
yeah, well, it's not amazing to me because the amount of, Stella's, there's a lot of love holding Stella's together, and that originates with
You know,
you.
interesting you bring up love because that to me is something that gets to grow if you practice it. Um, I know for me, I tried not to walk through that door and bring bad energy into the house. Now, how does that happen? You know, for me, it was saying prayers before I even came onto the property
Hmm.
to be guided.
And if you were sort of inspired or directed or, by prayer on the way in, then to some degree, there was a physical practice, but there was also a spiritual practice that the two of them were really sort of integrated at some level as you walked around. You've described before to me how you walk around in the morning and almost like you're doing a pre-flight on an airplane. The things that you look for, and a lot of them are just, physical things, but a lot of them are, the reasons for them seem to be connected to sort of the energy in the house and, your feeling and I guess your understanding of the rhythm of the house. And so, that's something that really I found really interesting because most people looked at these things like a mechanical process, and you really looked at it like an emotional or spiritual process.
I used to say, "Welcome aboard
Right.
the landlocked boat."
Uh-huh. That's right. It is kind of a ship to some degree. But you've told me that you don't make coffee. You don't, as far as being the barista, you always wanted to leave that to others. And there were a couple of reasons uh, for that. I don't know if you can speak to that. I mean,
Well, my physical was one of my problems. Uh, and once I understood that I needed young people, that's how it just evolved. Uh, but again, having those kids at the beginning uh, was very important. Uh, for
mm,
for me to work behind the counter would have never worked.
mhm.
I would have sunk the boat before
Yeah,
we got going.
yeah.
When I started to have music, uh, my thought on that, I had a few complainers interrupting some of the study. Uh, but I felt, I don't know whether I had a right to, but I felt like live music was a good thing for our patrons.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, just a couple of hours on Saturday night, Friday night, Saturday night,
Mm-hmm.
and Sunday morning. There was sessions for that.
What kind of music in general
You
was?
know, a lot of it seemed to be Irish,
Uh-huh.
um, Irish roots. And sometimes you hear a harp
Mm-hmm.
uh, and a cello and a violin, especially on Sunday mornings.
Mm-hmm.
I really enjoyed that um, couple of hours in here, although I didn't get to sit down
Mm-hmm.
too often. I do remember one time uh, I was coming in the back door and I heard cheering and clapping, and this was when the Broncos were doing a championship game, and going, somebody snuck a TV in here, and I was totally opposed to
Mm-hmm.
having a television in the house. And I come around the corner, and it was the Lighthouse Group. What's the
Okay.
Lighthouse Group? Poetry.
Oh, really?
These people are cheering.
For poetry? That's something.
And I'm going, at that time it was pretty early, and I'm going, we found our people.
Mm-hmm. Or they found you. Yeah.
Yeah. Now they have their own building, I think, and
Mm-hmm.
interesting. And then the lady that would come in here, I think it was every Tuesday morning, to help people write their resumes.
Mm-hmm. That I've not heard of. That sounds very helpful.
Yeah, and that was several years. Uh, I remember when Kate was our barista, and she was uh, another good
Good soul.
person in the house. Uh, there's so many of them, and Christy, uh, I don't know. I There's just too many people that have put their energy in this house.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, no one person could take the credit for that. You can guide it somewhat. You can tell certain people they're not welcome here because they don't have manners enough to be here. Uh,
It almost sounds like,
that was the only rule I really had. You got
yes,
to have
be polite.
manners.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, ultimately there's a lot of energy that you're enabling. And one of the things that I learned fairly soon or early, um, you know, running it or watching it being run was how much input the baristas have. I came into it thinking that we were going to some degree that I was going to be involved with driving the menu and driving, that I was going to be involved like on a daily basis or at least on a weekly basis. And that's proven to be unnecessary because we just enabled the staff, um, you know, from all the way from product selection to, the art, to, in essence, make the case and run it themselves to some degree. So there's guardrails for sure that are just based on basic business fundamentals, but this is all about enabling them to
Get air
get
underneath their
underneath their
wings.
wings. Yeah, exactly. So, and if they've got great ideas, they float them up, and we consider them, and everybody's taken very
Some
seriously.
of some of those they get after they leave here.
Right.
which is, that's kind of how education goes. Go, why am I taking this class? And then, years later, oh, I needed to know this.
Right. I know how this works now. Yeah.
So it's been a good journey. Um, and Build Back Better is, I like to steal that because it's really true in this case.
Mm-hmm.
Of what your talents are, right down to picking the paint or the windows that we put in,
Yeah.
or the clean air in here as opposed to a lot of other places you go to.
Yeah. We put in a system that destroys bacteria, viruses. It's an electrostatic system. And yeah, we put new windows in the back and window coverings, and we're planning a back patio, but also being very conscious of what Stella is and not changing it so much that basically it turns into something else. So that's
I can't
my
tell you how
priority.
many times I've heard, oh, Mark has it. He's a developer.
Uh-huh.
What's he going to do?
Right. Is he going?
Well, Mark's going to do what Mark's going to do, but he likes the soul of what's happening here. Uh, so it's it's going to be your choice for forever. But uh, that was important to me to kind of connect with you like that.
Yeah.
And um, when I started this business, and I probably had no um, clue what I was saying, but gone. I'm building this to at least be here 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
Now that's beyond me.
Right.
Um, and I think I pretty much stuck to that model because when I first opened, people said you're going to be there 6 months. And so I put the sign in like 5 feet deep. I'm going, it's not going to be easy to get rid of me.
Right.
Um, and, they could have been right, I guess. But I think that guiding with prayer made this happen. It was a miracle to me
Mm-hmm.
all the time. Um, and I just would marvel at it. How are we getting through this sometimes? Business is. Um, so be the calm duck.
Mm-hmm. It um,
It's what we're projecting.
yeah. Yeah, as far as this, to like I said, this is I'm I don't know if custodian is the word, but I'm just here for a period of time, and then the baton gets handed to somebody else who keeps this going the way it is, and it's not really if it ends up uh, being put in a trust to protect it or being deed restricted to protect it. It's just going to end up if it's the last original building standing on the street, that's where it's going to end up. That's what it's going to end up being. So,
It'd be a shame if they get rid of more. They're not building these little communities anymore.
right.
Uh, it could evolve into something that could, like I said, build back better.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah.
Only time will tell, and uh, hopefully it keeps doing some good things.
Well,
Amen.
amen. I think,
That's our prayer.
yep, nice coffee chat this morning. And thank you, Stella's community. And
Amen.
come visit us.
What did I say? All praise to God, because that's why it's still here.
Right.
Amen.
Amen.